Hi everyone, welcome to the TriEssence martial art channel. Fact or Fiction episode 10, part 2. Is Chinese martial art based on striking or sore losers? Yeah, you heard it right, I didn't make a mistake here. And unfortunately this wasn't a planned part 2. The video that's about whether Chinese martial art was based on striking or grappling, that was meant to be a solo video, one part only. But due to some recent development, I've decided to make a follow-up video, which is part 2. We're going to talk about whether Chinese martial art is based on striking or is actually based on sore losers. Now, I don't usually do this. In fact, this is the first time where I'm going to talk about some drama in my martial art channel. So for those of you that came here for martial arts information, history and knowledge, I do apologize that I had to bring you some drama this time, and I do promise you that this will not be a regular thing, because I personally do not think drama helps with anything at all. However, given the development of this incident, I do think that I should make a video to talk about it. And of course, I do know there should be people out there who do enjoy some good old Chinese martial arts world drama. And even those that might not enjoy drama, you might still learn a thing or two about this historical topic of Chinese martial arts that we are going to be talking about. So hopefully that all of you have already seen my last video, which is talking about whether Chinese martial art is based on striking or grappling. And obviously that title is a little bit of a clickbait. Unfortunately, it's something that I don't like doing, but I have to do it from time to time in order to get people to view the video. If I just say Chinese martial arts, the historical development of its name, it sounds very boring and uninteresting, which is why I chose that title. But right in the beginning of that video, I've already stated that Chinese martial art isn't just striking and it isn't just grappling. In fact, it has 4 fundamental building blocks, which is 踢打摔拿, right? Kicking, striking with your hand first mainly, throwing, 摔, and now which is 准 locking. I made that pretty clear right in the beginning of my video. And through the entire video, in a nutshell, let's just quickly recap. In a nutshell, I basically said that what Chinese martial art has all 4, but there is clearly a preference, which is to first striking. And we know this because the original name given to Chinese martial art systems was 拳法, and then I provide a historical record and manuscript where 拳法 was used when talking about empty-hand combat systems from civilian styles. And 拳 means first, 法 means method, and then I pointed out that almost all the Chinese martial art systems that we know of today, the name starts with something something and end with the character 拳, which means first. Like, long first, 通背 first, 八极 first, etc., etc. And lastly, I talked about the fact that if you use a rational, logical exclusion method of thinking, you can ask yourself this. Is there any Chinese martial art system with its name ending in something something 拳, right, something first, that does not consist of any striking? As far as I know, there are none. Any style called something something first in Chinese, it has to have at least some striking in it. However, on the other hand, I can easily provide examples of Chinese martial art system that has its name called something something 拳, that does not have any throwing or 准 locking. I gave the example 五行通背. In fact, the original 齐家通背, which 五行通背 came from, has no throw or locks either, which is obvious because 五行通背 came from 齐家通背. But furthermore, 义拳, one of the more recently developed Chinese traditional martial art styles, its original form has no throw or 准 lock either. If you go to study 义拳with the Yao brothers in Beijing, you can clearly see that they don't believe in throwing or locking. It's all manipulation of structure and then punching really hard. And furthermore, Yao brothers' father, Yao Zongxun, he was one of the most important figures in Yi Quan of his second generation. And he was appointed to be Wang Xiangzhai, Yi Quan's founder's successor. In fact, Wang Xiangzhai gave him a name called Yao Ji Xiang. Right? Yao is Yao Zongxun's surname. Ji means to inherit. Xiang is a character from Wang Xiangzhai's own name. So basically, by giving him that name, he's showing everyone that Yao Zongxun is his appointed successor. Not saying that any of the other lineages of Yiquan is not authentic, but this shows you how important Yao Zongxun's lineage is to its founder Wang Xiangzhai. And if you examine Yao lineage of Yiquan, there are no throw, there are no locks, there is control and there are punches. And I think that is a pretty solid argument or an evidence to say that Yiquan has no throw, has no lock, very little kick, mostly punches, and the style is called Yiquan, something first. So from this we can clearly see that the only requirement for a Chinese martial art style to be called something first is for it to have hand and foot striking. Whereas the other three building blocks, namely kicking, throwing, and locking, is not a requirement for any martial art system in China to be named something Quan. On the other hand, system that does not have any striking, such as Shuai Jiao, is not named something Quan, instead it's called Shuai Jiao. So if you just look at this logically and rationally, you can clearly see that Chinese martial arts, at least those that were originally extended from the concept of Quanfa, first method, they are primarily based on striking. And even if today there are a lot of throwing and joint locking in some of these systems, originally those styles were based off the main concept of striking. Everything else is used as a supplement. Striking is the main course. So personally, if I might say so myself, I do believe I put up a pretty convincing and fair argument, right? I'm not saying that throwing is useless. I'm not saying that Chinese martial art Quanfa has zero throw, zero locking, only punching. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is they have all four, but striking is favored by most Chinese martial art Quanfa systems, and in some, they just have striking. They don't have anything else, and can still be considered part of the overall Quanfa category. Yet, for some reason, this individual called David Ross, who runs some Chinese martial arts school in New York, got his panty in a jersey and got really upset over this video. And he started arguing with me. Here you can see his first initial argument that he posted on my YouTube channel. So the first thing he's trying to say is that Taksheng Pi Gua Men, right, one of the styles that I mentioned in my video, the first set is called Pi Gua Quan, was the first. The second set is called Pi Gua Zhang, which means Pi Gua palm. The third set is Pi Gua Tui. And in the North, you've also seen the same system as either Pi Gua Quan or Pi Gua Zhang. Now, first of all, the part of my video where I mentioned about Pi Gua Quan and Pi Gua Zhang, right, the first version and the palm version, I was just trying to show that in our language, we make a differentiation. If the style consists of first striking, it's often called Pi Gua Quan or whatever else, something Quan, ending with a first. Whereas when the style doesn't consist of any first, like Pi Gua Zhang, right? If you look at that entire form of that system, they do Pi Gua with open palm and they do strike with open palm. And therefore, they don't use the character Quan or first in the naming of the style. Instead of calling Pi Gua Quan, they call it Pi Gua Zhang. That's all I was trying to show in that portion of the video. And in fact, within the Northern Pi Gua Zhang system, they have one form that they primarily using first, and that form is called Qinglong Quan, right? The green dragon first. So the whole style is called Pi Gua Zhang, but when the form consists of mainly first and punching, they call it something Quan, Qinglong Quan. So this further can show you that when the Chinese people name their systems, they are pretty particular about it, right? When the system uses first, it's called Quan. When it uses palm, it's called Zhang. And the point that David Ross brought up about the Hong Kongese branch, Dasheng Pi Gua Men, where the first form is called first, second form is called palm, it just further proves my point that when the first form uses first, it's called Pi Gua Quan, and if the second form uses palm, it's called Pi Gua Zhang, and if the third form is a lot about kicks, it's called Pi Gua Jiao. So in fact, he's actually agreeing to my point, but he's presenting it as an argument. All I'm saying is Chinese people don't name a style first out of habit. They name it because the style consists of punching. When it doesn't, it's named with zhang or with tui or jiao, right? Tui means leg, jiao means foot. For example, chuo jiao is a very famous northern kicking style. And that style is called chuo jiao, not chuo jiao quan, because primarily focuses on various type of kicks. and only when that style, and I mean if you want to go further, its older name is called 九之子, right? There's no name of first in it either. Another name for it is 九转鸳鸯连环腿, which means the 9-turn Mandarin duck combination kick. So any of these names, there's no character of 拳 or first because the style focuses on kicks. And when that style eventually merged with 翻子拳, become 戳脚翻子, then they call it 戳脚翻子拳 because 翻子 is using first, therefore is 拳. So this is pretty clear and can be backed up by loads of evidence. I don't even see why there's a point to argue about this. So then next he says, the designation of 拳 or 拳法 does not necessarily mean striking only or even striking primarily, as 螳螂拳 Mantis first is actually an application mostly 拿 and a lot of 摔. 翻子门 individually focuses on kicking and palm, but 翻子门 has also been mixed with 鹰爪翻子门, right? I also talked about in my previous video the eagle claw 翻子 first, and like Mantis, it is 摔 focused, throwing for focused. Okay, so first of all, I've never said that 拳法 means striking only. I just said there are styles called 拳 that does not have throw and lock. Okay, so this guy either can't read or he can't listen or he just can't use his brain to think logically. Secondly, he's claimed that Mantis is primarily 准 locking and throwing. And based on my experience, that is utterly incorrect. And I replied to him. I said that I've done 2 lineages of Mantis. First, I studied 7-star Mantis with a master called Zhang Yunchao, whose master is called Wang Qingzhai, who was one of the most famous 7-star Mantis grandmasters in the northern eastern province. And later on, I actually spent a lot of time training Taiji plum flower Mantis with the Beijing branch under my Mantis teacher Ma Weiling 老师. And his teacher, or his master, is a very famous Mantis grandmaster, Ma Hanqing, who personally is a master of 2 lineages of Mantis, 6 harmony and plum flower. And while I did not have the time to actually learn 6 harmony Mantis with my Mantis teacher, I have asked him about it and seen him demonstrating it, and have seen my fellow Mantis, classmates or Mantis brothers who have trained the 6 harmony version of Mantis. And out of that kind of comprehensive experience, I can say for certainty that of all the Mantis that I've done, it is primarily focused on striking with some throwing and some准locking that supplement or complement the style. In fact, when I replied to this David Ross, I told him that I can run through all the Mantis forms that I know of, which is about 12 in total, which isn't everything. Mantis has around 24 forms in total, but half of its total form is a pretty good sample size. I can run through 12 forms, and I can break down every single application, and we can make a counter. And I can guarantee him that about 75% of those applications are focused on striking. There are a few throws here and there, some of which are actually 跌法, which is tripping, not actually strictly speaking throwing. And there's very few locks completely. And let's define what 擒拿 or lock is. 擒 means to seize or catch. Lock, 拿 means to hold. So actually 擒拿 in actual Chinese character, it means seize or catch and hold. What this suggests that you have to grab someone, put him in a drill lock and hold him there, and make him pretty much submit or concede. Very similar to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, except that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu do it on the ground, right? They do kick in an arm bar, in a rear naked choke, and you have to submit, or they break your arm, or suffocate you. So in the same way, 擒拿 in Chinese is just a standing version of trying to put somebody in a hold, and they don't comply, you break their arm, or do something that damages their joint. However, in Mantis, a lot of the time, even though a technique is used to attack a joint, it's not there to hold the joint. The attack of the joint is only there to open the opponent up for further striking. In which case, it's actually not 擒拿 strictly speaking. It's just attacking a joint or using a reverse joint to get an advantage. And the overall technical combo is actually to strike someone, not to hold someone in a joint lock. And if you use this more strict definition, the Mantis almost have no 擒拿. And I say almost because there are some here and there, but super rare. So it's definitely incorrect to say that Mantis is mostly throwing and joint locking. That is completely untrue based on the actual Mantis style that I've spent years learning. And let's keep in mind that David Ross, I don't even think he actually do Mantis. Okay, he just claimed that because he knows someone who does Mantis. And that's basically on a completely different level of understanding to a person like me who actually spent time dedicated in learning Mantis system. I don't even know why he thinks he had the right to argue with me. And I'm not saying that I'm a great Mantis practitioner, I've never said that. And in all my past videos, if you watch them, you'll know that I've never said I'm great at Mantis. But you don't have to be great at the style to know what the style is about, especially when someone who's actually learned 12 forms from Mantis. I'm pretty sure I have a better idea of what Mantis style does and does not do than the person who actually never trained Mantis. And maybe he did, but he certainly did not learn half the total of forms to have a better comprehensive understanding on all the techniques and combos that are included in the system. I want to offer to basically show every single Mantis form, he just ignored it and moved on to other arguments. And the next part, he says that 番子们, right, 番子拳, individually trains kicks and palm. Well, that's simply not true either. 番子拳 has some kicks within a form, but does not separately train kicks. The kicking style that you see is actually 戳脚, a completely separate system that focuses on kicking. And at some point in the Qing Dynasty, 戳脚and 番子 merged into 戳脚番子们, or 戳脚番子拳, which is found in Beijing. And therefore, they have forms that come from 番子, which they punch mostly with some kick here and there, and they have form from 戳脚 side, where they only do kicks with some handwork here and there. So the fact that he actually says that 番子拳 itself has an entire dedicated form to train kicks, that is simply incorrect. And this shows how little he actually knows about this topic that he's trying to pretend to be an authority of. And the next part, he says, 番子is also mixed with eagle claw, which then is focused on shuai and joint locking. Well, again, I never said that Chinese martial arts called 拳法 has no throwing or locking completely. I only say some styles don't have them, others have them. And the fact that 戳脚番and 番子们had to merge with eagle claw to have throwing and locking just shows you that 番子拳 originally did not have them. Otherwise, why do you need to mix with another style if you already have the type of technique that style is doing? That just makes no sense. And like I said in my previous videos, the one about side stance, I've actually met people from Xiongxian County, the origin place of 鹰爪番子拳, and they've shown me the 番子 side of their style, and it looks almost identical to other 番子拳 that I've came across. I mean, of course, the flavor is different, but the technique is very similar. When they're doing 番子, it's up there and down there. There are the two punches, left punch and right punch. So the fundamental building block of 番子拳 striking technique is still there, even though that it merged with eagle claw. On top of that, eagle claw originally is called 越式散手 or 越家散手, which means the Yue family's loose hand. So loose hand here refers to techniques that are not formulated into a form or a system, because originally 越家散手 only has 9 techniques. And only when that manuscript is merging with 番子拳 does it become 鹰爪番子拳, where the name takes on the lost character of fist 拳. Basically, this further confirms what I mentioned in my previous video, that the Chinese martial art style is only called 拳when it actually strikes. So this David Ross, he either can't use logical thinking, or he doesn't actually think about what he says before he says it. Because half the time, he's only confirming my theory, while in his mind, he thinks he's actually putting up a very good counter argument. That's pretty stupid. So next he says that 形意拳 has tons of shuai and na, and 八卦 has a lot of shuai. Again, I never said that Chinese martial art 拳法 has no shuai or no na. I just say that they primarily focus on striking. So again, I don't even know why he brings that up, other than trying to, find some soft words by, asserting some kind of authority over something that he actually doesn't have an argument on. And over here, he said that he can also argue that General Qi Guang's 32 posture has a lot of shuai and qin na. To that, I just said, so what? Everybody knows that. In fact, I've translated his original manuscript, which in it he says that a lot of these civilian-based martial arts only focus on one aspect. Well, he believed that the base system is a complete one that consists of all four of these building blocks, 踢打摔拿. So obviously in his own 32 posture, he's going to have striking, kicking, throwing, and joint locking. There's nothing new. I've already translated that in my original video. Why he even brings this up? Other than the fact that he actually has nothing better to say, but he still want to say something to pretend like he knows more. It's to find some kind of pathetic self-worth. And I've stressed this many times. I've never said that it is only striking. All I'm saying is a style that originates from striking is called Quan. A martial art that originates from throwing with no striking is not called something Quan. That is the essence of my last video. And all these points that he's bringing up to this point doesn't contradict that point. Yet he presents them like some kind of argument. That is very stupid for him to do and makes absolutely no logical sense. So to this point, it should be pretty obvious that he is just arguing for nonsense. He doesn't actually have a point that I didn't already cover in my video, other than the fact that incorrectly accusing Mantis of primarily strike and na, and of course claiming that Fan Ziquan has entire dedicated side or form that trans kicks. Those just shows you how little he actually knows about these Chinese martial arts styles that I've been talking about. So in the next reply he gave me, he again asserts that he knows his Mantis. Again, I'm not saying that his lineage is wrong, but it doesn't represent all of Mantis. Especially when I actually know one lineage from 7 Star, one from Pound Flower, and I've pretty much observed another one which is 6 Harmony, and all three of them focus on striking more than throwing and locking. And notice I say more, not zero. There is not zero. It's not that there's no throwing, no locking, but there's more striking. The fact that I've seen 3 lineages and styles of Mantis that agree with my point, and he only has one that agree with his point, would suggest that maybe his lineage just decided to go into throwing a bit more or locking. But it doesn't represent the whole picture. You can't look at one lineage and then try to claim that represents everyone in China. That is very naive and arrogant thinking. And then he said that he found it interesting that I do Xingyi, yet I claim that there are no Na or Shuai in the 5 elemental first. They are very clear in the 5 first despite the different traditions. Alright, first of all, I don't do Xingyi. I don't even know why he thinks that way. In all my videos, I've always stated clearly that I don't do Xingyi, but I happen to know a lot of Xingyi friends. And out of them, not all of them agrees on Shuai or throw, but they all agree on striking. So for example, right, when I spoke to Byron Jacob, who studies Hebei Xingyi under Master Di Guoyong, he's told me that in his lineage, 5 elemental first is 5 different type of power, which is agreed upon by most Xingyi practitioners. And he believes that it can be used for striking, it can be used for throwing or joint locking. However, he also said that Xingyi predominantly favors striking. The preferred method of combating in Xingyi is to get close to a guy and punch him really hard, which again fit my initial video's observation and conclusion. Furthermore, my friend from Song Style Xingyi, right, Zhang Ming and Wang Ming, right, the two that I've talked about in my previous videos about myself, and their master is one of the most well-respected Song Style masters in Beijing, also in Shanxi province, Master Zhang Zengji. From that lineage, they believe that 5 elemental first is 5 powers also, but it's 5 powers to strike people with. They don't believe in throwing people with 5 elemental first or joint locking. And I have yet another friend that I know pretty well, we always hang out together, who's called Yin Xinzheng, right? He comes from a lineage that traces back to Zhang Zhaodong lineage of Xingyi and Bagua. And when I asked him about this, he simply just said, in their lineage, Xingyi is spear without a spear. And what that means is, what do you do with a spear? You stab people with it. So in their style, Xingyi is to stab people with your hand or fist. And that says as much, right? There is no throw, there's no joint locking. So I'm not saying that Byron Jacob's understanding is incorrect, right? Each lineage has their own understanding, which is perfectly fine. But if you observe the overall understanding, they all agree upon striking, but not on throwing and drain locking. And what does that tell you? Well, it suggests that originally when the style was invented, most likely 5-element first was used for striking. And then later on, people realized, hey, wait a minute, you can also do a throw with it or do a lock with it. Or at some point, people want to be a more complete system, right? Instead of having just striking, you can also have some throwing and some locking, and that way the style looks more complete. I'm not saying that's exactly how some lineage start to have throws and locks, but I'm saying that could be what happened. There's nothing wrong with that, but that doesn't take away from the fact that Xingyi came from a concept of a spear. I mean, of course, it's finally well-known, studied under the Shanxi Dai family. But overall, the concept of Xingyi is like a spear. And a spear is to strike people with. You don't throw people with a spear or lock people with a spear, you strike people with a spear. Which obviously means that at its core, 5 elemental first, of which each of the 5 first, you can represent them carrying a spear. So that pretty much shows you that its original invented purpose is most likely to strike someone, which is why it's called 劈拳、钻拳、崩拳. And just in case some of you wonder, okay, why is it called 劈拳when it actually uses a palm? Well, there are actually lineages, for example, the Shang Yunxiang lineage, that does 劈拳with the fist. And they claim that the original version is a fist, but somewhere along the line, people changed it into a palm. I don't actually know if that claim is real, but I just know that some of the lineages of Xingyi do still do 劈拳 with a fist. And if you look at the Shanxi Dai family, when they do 劈拳, although it's not the same motion per se, they basically go up and then go downwards, they actually do it with a fist and not with a palm. The palm is called 鹰捉, right? The eagle catcher, or eagle catching something, 鹰捉. So the version with open hand is called 鹰捉, the version where they close the fist is called 劈拳. And some lineages like the Shang Yunxiang lineage that you find today, they pretty much follow that tradition. They call this 鹰捉, and then they call a first version 劈拳. But either way, the point is, with 劈拳there is a discrepancy, but there are versions where they say that 劈拳had to be done with the first to be called 劈拳. With the other 4, it's clearly that they are first. I mean, you might be able to throw or drain lock, but clearly 钻拳 is an uppercut, 崩拳 is a punch to the stomach or the ribs, 炮拳 is blocking, and the punch, depending on your lineage, could either be a straight punch or a hook punch to the face or to the body. And 横拳, maybe it can be interpreted as a throw, but in the lineages that I'm accustomed to, they use it as almost like an interception technique to set up, for example, for 炮拳. And of course, another piece of evidence that you can basically look at is 安身炮. Right? 安身炮 is basically a Xingyi two-man drill form that was invented, I think, around Republic era. It's designed to train the combat responsiveness of Xingyi practitioners. And it comes directly from the application of the 5 elemental first. And if you look at 安身炮, it's pretty much blocking and punching. There's no drain locking and there's no throwing. So that further shows you that the most primary intention and purpose of 5 elemental first is definitely striking. As for 八卦, single palm change, double palm change, that was originally a throwing technique? Probably not, because as far as we know, 摔跤, the throwing side of 八卦, was introduced by Cheng Tinghua, a disciple of Dong Haichuan. And Cheng Tinghua, before learning from Dong Haichuan, was a 摔跤 practitioner, and therefore he was very good at throwing. And upon learning from Dong Haichuan, he incorporated what Dong Haichuan taught him, but he still had his throwing habit, so he sort of incorporated that into his system. So the Cheng style 八卦 has a lot of wrestling-like application. And if you wonder why other lineages of 八卦 also have throwing, well, simply because back in the days, the disciples of Dong Haichuan often would exchange skills among one another. And especially as it developed towards a later stage, more and more mixing and matching between styles, exchanging knowledge happens between different lineages of 八卦, which is why eventually everyone's got throwing. And of course, to make a style more complete, you kind of have to include throw. But that does not mean that when Dong Haichuan founded 八卦, the single and double palm change was actually throwing. Of course, there are no direct evidence to prove this, but then again, there's nothing to prove that it was designed for throwing. However, a side evidence that you can basically take into consideration is the fact that if you look at any manuscript that recorded events from Dong Haichuan and from Xingyi masters such as its founder Li Luoneng, to Guo Yunshen, to Li Cunyi, to Shang Yunxiang, to Sun Lutang, to Xue Dian, to Fu Jianqiu, of all these names that I've mentioned, if you look through texts that discuss about challenges and fights that they've been through, all of them describes they striking somebody out or winning a fight with a strike. I've yet to come across a description where they say a Xingyi master or Dong Haichuan, the founder of Bagua, wrestled someone and won the fight, or put someone in a joint lock. If it happened, and happens a lot, then it should have been written down in these records. But they are not, which means most of the time, if not all the time, they've won their fight with striking. And if all these top masters choose to strike when they fight with people back in the days, then obviously the style primarily focuses on striking. There's no room to argue on this. Then he says basic form are not the system, and any claim about when they did in Qing or Ming will always be speculative. In my main method, if you went by the first 3 sets, you would think there are very few kicks. There are many. Also, the Na and Shuai may not be immediately obvious, but they are there. Well, that may be true for some lineage, but is incorrect for others. I can counter-argue that by saying that the basic fundamental of each style represent exactly what's the most valuable concept at its core. For example, Xingyi's most valuable concept is the 5 elemental first. Bagua's most valuable concept is single and double palm change. Tai Chi's most valuable concept or practice is Peng Lu Ji An Cai Lie Zhou Kao, the 8 forces of Tai Chi. In fact, a lot of systems have a summary of its core, like Wu Xing Tong Bei. We have 5 strikes: Shuai, Pai, Chuan, Pi, Zuan. The entire system evolves around these 5 attacks. And for mantas have 14 words, which represent 14 types of powers they apply. So what this shows us is that, I'm not saying all the styles, but at least a good portion of the styles that I've had experience with, if you look at this core concept, the main concept, that's pretty much what was there originally. Everything that's not in this core concept or its primary form, chances are will add in at a later stage. As the style try to be more complete, they're going to incorporate more and more techniques into it, which in a sense dilutes the system, but that's like a topic for another video. But the point is, by looking at its most basic fundamental form or its most fundamental practice, you can actually see what is most valuable in the system. And all I ever have been saying in my last video is that when it comes to Chinese martial art known as Quanfa category, most of them primarily focuses on striking. At least when the system was founded. Otherwise, they would not have named the style something something Quan. And then he tried to act smart and challenge me by saying, please do find the name of a CMA that does not have any throw or qinna. He will find this fascinating. And you know what I told him? Yiquan and Wu Xing Tong Bei. And you know what happened after that? He just ignored it because he knows he lost this argument, but he is too little of a man to admit that he was wrong. So instead, he just went on to argue about something else. That's how pathetic this person is. So then over here, he's quoting my reply to him, where I said you can almost take any martial motion and interpret it as Na or Shuai, but does not mean that a particular motion was originally designed for that purpose. But he, trying to say that, or maybe you can interpret it because it was that application. And then he said, who am I to say that it's not Na or Shuai? Well, it's not me who is important here, it's the observation that I've made. And I've given examples and evidence of such where he did not. So if any of you have seen my previous video called Possibility Does Not Equal Probability, right? In that I've talked about how just because this application or this motion can be explained into this application, it does not actually mean that is the original intention for this technique or application. And I can give you an example right here. In Yiquan, there is a stance called the dragon stance. I can't show you from this angle, but it looks like this, and your legs are twisted, right? It's called the dragon stance. And I have seen some Yiquan people in Hong Kong who claim that this dragon stance is used as a throw. You grab somebody and you throw them. And naturally, they got the idea because when you look at Chinese wrestling, they actually have a practice where they hold a belt and they turn around and they snap the belt. And that for them is using to throw someone, right? However, if you actually look from the origin of the Yiquan lineage, for example, from the founder Wang Xiangzhai to Yao Zongxun to the Yao brothers, you can clearly see that this Xianglong Zhuang, right, the dragon subdue stance, has nothing to do with a wrestling stance. Instead, it is used to train a spiral force that is important to Yiquan overall structure. Every stance in Yiquan is there to train a particular type of force. So long story short, just because a motion or a movement can be explained into a throw, it does not actually mean the original intention for the design of this movement is a throw. Which is why when I replied to this guy, I said just because you can explain a certain motion by, shuai or qinna, it doesn't actually mean that move was originally designed for that purpose. And then he's saying based on his view, not only upon his own long and extensive practice, keep in mind he did not practice Xingyi or Mantis as far as I know, or Fanziquan. So he didn't practice any of the styles that we're actually discussing here, or Bagua for that matter. So I don't even know why he's trying to insert authority by saying his long and extensive training practice. I mean, it's irrelevant here. I can have a PhD in particle physics, it doesn't mean that I know what I'm saying in chemistry, for example. It's completely irrelevant. And then he said that the view is very well documented and respected people. But, and then he says, sorry, but your friends are not the be-all, end-all. On the other hand, Zhang Junfeng is a very reputable Xingyi person, and there are many others to cite. Well, you see, that's how he argued. He basically belittles my connection, and then he tried to uplift his own, and that's very sad and a very pathetic way to argue. So later on, I actually pushed him by saying, are you saying that Master Zhang Zengji, Master Di Guoyong, and and who are other masters that my friends studied under, that they are wrong? You want to come on record and say that in public? And he just ignores us and move on to another argument. And he just keeps dodging anything that he can't win and move on to something else that he thinks he might win, which is really sad and pathetic. And then he said, hated to break it to me, but turning in striking usually is indication of na or shuai. Really have to wonder how I don't know that. Well, the funny thing is this is a response to my comment that in Fanziquan, the primary concept is called Ba Fan, the 8th turn. And clearly he doesn't know what Ba Fan is about. He doesn't know what Fanziquan is, in order to make a speculation that turn means Juan locking. Because obviously, anyone who did Fanziquan will know turn in Fanzi refers to a change of direction. Right, it's up and down, meaning when I strike up and I get interference, I'm going to strike down. When I strike left, I get interference, I'm going to strike right. That's the basic principle of Fanziquan, that when you touch something, you turn and hit in another direction, and keep turning and changing the angle of strike. That's what Fanziquan at its core is all about. It has nothing to do with Juan locking. You can see how he's sucking stuff out of his ass in order to cover up for the lack of knowledge, which is pretty infuriating for someone who poses himself as a historian of Chinese martial arts. It's okay to not know everything. I don't know everything either. I don't claim to know every single style in Chinese martial art. But I only talk about the styles that I do know. I don't talk about styles that I don't know. And when someone proves me wrong with hard evidence, I will gladly admit it. So, it's not shameful or bad to not know something. But when someone like this claim to be a historian, but act like he knows everything, but actually doesn't, and still insist that he knows it, and refuse to admit that he is wrong, that's really sad and pathetic. And then he says, and your claim that any style of CMA, much less Tongbei, has no qinna or shuai is frankly absurd. Well, sue me. I am a disciple of Wuxing Tongbei, and I've been training Baiyan Tongbei from my father and from Zhang Xinbin Lao Shi for many years. I've actually put in the years of training to know that Tongbei originally do not have throwing. He doesn't even do Tongbei or know what Tongbei is about, and he's saying that my, claim is absurd. That's pretty stupid and sad. And in response to, him telling me that it's absurd that Wuxing Tongbei, right, does not have throws or locks, and the fact that Fanziquan is primarily a hand-striking, fist-striking style. I told him that, have you actually read the original manuscript from this style, whether it's 五行通背, whether it's 齐家通背, the Qi family 通背, or whether it's 分子拳, have you actually read those manuscripts? In those manuscripts, it says pretty clearly what each of these motions are intended for. And his response to this is basically, just because a text, especially a public text, doesn't state in black and white, this is also 擒拿 or 摔, does not make it so as you claim. And again, if you really were studying in Chinese martial art, you would see the obvious. As I said, in turn and the subtext of the move, in Chinese martial art, most moves are all of them. Obviously, that's a very stupid argument. And it further shows that he knows absolutely nothing of the actual traditional Chinese martial art culture. Those of you that have been following my channel should know that I have nothing against foreigners doing Chinese martial art. In fact, I have nothing against anyone, right? I believe that all races and ethnic groups are equal on this planet. However, when someone that is from America, for example, is trying to tell me what my home culture should and shouldn't be, that's actually the only absurd thing in this entire argument. And I'm not just flaunting these words without cause. And here is hard evidence. Now, manuscript of any style cannot be considered as public text. Yes, while there are certain manuscripts, such as the Yang family Taiji's manuscript, the Wang Zongyue Taiji Lun, right? Or certain other manuscripts like the Xingyi's first classic manuscript. So there are these manuscripts that was exposed to public and consequently published in books, in publications, and therefore everyone who's looking for them can find them. That is utterly not true for all Chinese martial arts. In fact, if we just look at the custom of Chinese martial art in the Qing dynasty, each system's manuscript is kept as its uttermost secret. Only indoor disciples, selected few, who have the privilege of actually looking at the manuscript, reading through it, and writing a copy for themselves. The average outdoor student from any lineage, they can't even read this manuscript. They don't even know what is inside. How can anyone claim that the manuscript of a style is public text? While some of them, like I mentioned, Yang style Taiji, etc., has since Republic era, publicated the manuscript. But that does not mean the time it was created, which is the Qing dynasty, it was intended to be public text. And what this means, logically and obvious, is that they will have no reason to hide secret and not include it in the manuscript. In fact, in China, any traditional authentic system will tell you that manuscript is the most essential guideline to what the style is all about. And here, I have a copy of manuscript that I personally copied by hand from my lineage the day I became an indoor disciple. I mean, as you can see, excuse my handwriting, that everything is handwritten. I mean, right? And over here is basically the seal and signature of my master, saying that this is an authentic copy of his manuscript. And this particular manuscript, you cannot find it anywhere. Obviously, I'm not going to expose the detail to this manuscript because that is against the custom of my system. But the point is, this is the actual manuscript that we pass down from master to indoor disciple. And it's not the same manuscript that you can find in a publication. So when I tell him to look at Wu Xing Tongbei's manuscript and Fan Ziquan's manuscript to see whether they have throwing or qin na in Wu Xing Tongbei's case, and in Fan Ziquan to see if Fan Ziquan is primarily focused on striking, what it actually means to have the 8 fan, right, 8 fan, the changing of direction in the strike. It will tell him that it's written in those script what they are for, and he's arguing against hard evidence, black text on white paper, something that he can't deny. But obviously at the same time, I also know that it is an impossible tall order because he has no access to this manuscript. As far as I know, the Wu Xing Tongmei manuscript has not been publicated. It is still kept among the lineage themselves. You can't find it in a publication. So how can anyone who have not even seen the manuscript claim to know what certain style is all about, what the basic fundamental technique, for example, the 8-10 8-fan is all about? That just shows how arrogant and how little he actually knows about the topic he's arguing against. And the next part he says, when you claim that prime mentors and ego claw do not focus on qina or shuai, your claim become absurd. As is any claim that any combat method would exclude qina and shuai from the method. And again, I don't know if he's stupid or what, but I've never said ego claw has no qina. In fact, in my very video, I mentioned that the ego claw king, according to Qi Jiguang's texture, was known for his qina. So I don't even know where he got this idea from. It's like he just sucking stuff out of thin air and accusing me of things I've never said. As for mantis, again, I've told him, I know 12 forms, I can run through all of them, every application combo, from beginning to end, and we can set a counter and see how many are striking, how many are throwing, how many are joint locking. How simple is that? Instead of taking me up on this offer, he just keep accusing me of being wrong without providing any evidence. That's the very pinnacle example of a bad argument. And as for claiming that any combat system would exclude Na and Shuai, well, you know what? Why don't you go speak to Wu Xing Tongmei? Go speak to Yiquan, ask them why they don't have Shuai and Na. I'm not the one who's claiming that. It's the fact. Go look. If he hadn't actually seen these styles, how does he know? He basically has an ideology that all Chinese martial arts must have qina and must have shuai, and possibly because he really likes them, which is fun. We're all entitled to like our own things. But you can't take your own liking and project it to the rest of the world. There are people who believe Earth is flat. But it doesn't mean the Earth is flat. They can believe what they want, but they can't tell everyone else that the Earth is flat because it is not flat. So in this case, if you want to say Yiquan has shuai and has na, well, good luck convincing the Yao brothers. Good luck convincing Da Cui. Good luck convincing Wang Xuanjie's lineage. I mean, everyone knows that Yiquan has no na and no shuai. And if you want to say that Wu Xing Tongmei has na and shuai, well, good luck convincing my own master. Good luck convincing the manuscript that we have, which clearly state what each technique is meant for, and there are no na and shuai. Another thing that this indicates is that he knows very little of the overall subject of Chinese martial arts. Look, I don't doubt he knows his own style pretty well, and I have never went into an argument with him about his own style. Why? Because I don't know it. I don't argue about stuff that I don't know of. I don't even talk about stuff that I don't know of. But he is doing exactly that. He's talking about styles that I spent years training, where he doesn't, and he's saying that what I trained is wrong. And when I asked him if he was willing to put on record that my master and their master are wrong, he just ignores us and moves on to another argument. That's how pointless and pathetic this person is when it comes to arguing. And then he says, you live in Beijing, wow, good for you. Don't keep you from using the wrong character in your video. And we all know the level of CMA on mainland China in 2021 is not the be-all and end-all of CMA. Maybe name drop less and train more. You see, from here you can see he's starting to get sour and he's starting to go into personal attack. It's like if you disagree with my argument, with my information, bring me historical evidence, bring me facts, bring me proof, and we argue on the subject, like proper academics, right? I mean, when you see physicists argue about string theory versus grand unification theory, you don't see them calling each other names, right? They bring out the equation and they argue with academic work. This guy here instead wanted to stop doing name calling and demeaning an entire martial art community. He's basically saying that the Chinese martial art world sucks. I mean, have you actually been to Beijing? Have you actually spent time there visiting masters to master? Like I did in the video that I've made previously about myself, the amount of time I spent in the martial art community. If you haven't done that, how do you know the martial art world is bad? I mean, just sucking it out of your own thumb, just dreaming it up. When you make a claim, you got to have proof where you got this information from. And the martial art community, whether it's China, Taiwan, or wherever, it doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all. Okay? It simply have to be authentic enough to have kept the information. And in China's case, it did keep the information. And the information contradicts his belief. And this is the essence of the problem, that he has a belief unsubstantiated no less, that he's unwilling to let go. And anything that contradicts his belief is automatically wrong. If the entire martial community is against his belief, then the entire martial community, aka the Chinese martial community in mainland China, must be wrong and he must be right. And that's how arrogant and cultish this person is. Only a cult would act like this. And martial arts, I've said in the previous video, should not be kept like a cult. Martial art should be like science, where we look at facts and we derive the correct answer. And this guy, unfortunately, is incapable of thinking in rational ways or formulate a proper academic argument. And then he's like, maybe name drop less and train more. Again, he's the one who started dropping names. He mentions that, his friends are from some lineage of mentors, and therefore I told him my lineage of mentors. Is that wrong? He started first. I don't drop names and let somebody else start. And it's not name dropping, I'm just pointing out that where I got my lineage from, where I got my understanding and my 12 mentors forms from. And whether I train more or train less is none of his business, and quite frankly unrelated to this topic. I don't have to be the best in mentor system to know what each form in my mentor system is meant to be. All I need is my master, who's a qualified legit mentor's master, to tell me what each move and combo is meant to be used, and by that I know what they are for. I don't have to be the best, and therefore training more, training less is completely irrelevant to this argument. And when a person can't argue on point, then quite frankly he should just stop arguing and go do something else and stop wasting everyone's time. But sadly, his ego prevents him from actually doing that. Instead, he's gonna go further to make a fool of himself. So here he said 40 years plus of training, including in China, with very reputable lineage, and many have actually part of the lineage, already stated this, plus is well documented, doing same-star mentors under, I don't know how to pronounce those names because they are not actually Chinese pinyin. In 1989, for example, I've done Pi Gua, Xing Yi, and Ba Gua. Also thank you. My primary teacher was good friend with Yin Zhao Fanzi master, and we know them very well. Don't try to infer I don't know the art you're talking about. Well, why don't we follow my suggestion? You show your 12 form that you know from mentors, I show mine, and then we compete note, and we compare notes, right? I can guarantee you that my form, which I did not make up, I can provide you evidence of my teacher doing these forms, and all the way back to Grandmaster Ma Hanqing, who learned from masters in Shandong. I can provide the exact proof that my form has not deviated from the original teaching. And then I can show you every movement, just as it was explained to me by my mentor's teacher Ma Laoshi. And then you can see how many strikes there are, how many strikes, and how many qian na. And then he can do his mentor's form that he learned, and then we will see. But he's unwilling to do that. Why? I don't even think he remembers his mentor's form. And he keep bringing up 鹰爪翻子拳, the eagle claw 翻子 foot, right? I don't even know why, because I never said that they don't have qian na. You see, he just basically put something that I never said, pretend I said it, and is wrong because he inserted that I said it, which I didn't, and then he hold on to it as if that is like a mistake that I made, and then keep arguing on something that I don't even care because I never said it. I don't care if his smartest friend was 鹰爪翻子拳, that's not relevant. I never say 鹰爪翻子拳 has no qian na, so I don't care what his master's friend say to his master and then to him, because that's not part of the argument. Another very bad habit that you can commonly see in Chinese martial community is like this, right? He inferred that he has 40 plus years of training, and therefore he must know more than me. That is completely stupid, because while the more years you spend doing something, the more you will know, but that's not the only factor. There are other factors too, like what source you got the information from, and how well you actually perceive information, and how many hours a day do you spend processing those information. 40 years doesn't mean he spent 8 hours a day processing those informations. And the fact that he called manuscript public text already show you how little he knows about Chinese martial art custom, the old way. If he knows anything about it, he would not have claimed that these manuscripts from Wuxing Tongbei and Fanzi Quan are public text. That already can prove my point and shows that he knows very little about Chinese traditional martial arts. So which is why when somebody says they spend 40 years, 50 years, 60 years in martial arts, it doesn't impress me because it doesn't tell me how many hours a day you are spending doing this. And if the information that you are spewing out is incorrect, then obviously you either spend time on the wrong information, the wrong source, or you didn't spend nearly as much time as you claim it to be. A person could join a martial art style, sit on his ass for 40 years, and turn around and say he did 40 years of martial art. Not saying that's what he did, but it just shows you that this kind of argument is pointless. And unlike most people, I'm actually a type of person who's very good at processing information because I have very little distraction in my life. Ever since my school days, I did not take part in any school activities, I did not take part in any social activities. All I did was processing martial art information. I read through a lot of books, I visited a lot of masters. I took years out of my useful life to go to China and spend with different masters, which I've already covered pretty in detail in my videos on Me, Myself, and I. So I'm not going to go into it here. But the point is, just because I have 20 plus years in Chinese martial art doesn't mean I know less than someone who spent 40 years. It really depends on the source and how much information I've actually processed. For example, ever since the pandemic started, I basically read through the medieval European history, the 100-Year War, War of the Roses, for no particular reason other than the fact that I'm curious. After that, I read through Wheel of Time, a fantasy novel, twice. After that, I started self-studying physics from the basics to relativity to quantum mechanics. I actually completed the whole online course on special relativity and the mathematical equations that you use to work out various problems within special relativity. Obviously, that has nothing to do with martial art, but this tells you that I process information as a hobby. During the pandemic, I don't sit around watching TV, sitting on my sofa. Other than training and making videos, I process other information. Even when it's not relevant to Chinese martial art, it doesn't matter because I just enjoy doing that. Which is why someone like him is very unlucky to meet somebody like me. I've seen him bullying other martial art practitioners on Facebook before. And he bullies them quite successfully because most of the martial art people don't read as much, and a lot of them don't actually speak Chinese, which allows him to bully them and they can't fight back. But unfortunately for him, I'm different. I've processed way more information than he even know existed. And up to this point, it should be pretty obvious how much of his arguments are incorrect. And every time something is incorrect, he just moves on, pretends that doesn't exist, and he tries to do something else. Which, like I keep saying, is really sad and pathetic. The fact remains that you say, sure, it can be interpreted that way, then claim it isn't correct based upon your opinion. Well, not my opinion, based on opinion of other people within the lineage and based on manuscript. An opinion which defies fact and logic. Well, what is fact? Fact is manuscript, hard evidence, or soft evidence, like, if Song lineage, Zhang Zhaodong lineage, Hebei lineage, they all agree that, Wu Xingquan is for striking, but only some think it can be used for throwing and locking and others don't, then obviously striking is a more correct answer. Fact is not something that he believes and therefore is true. That's not fact. That's the very opposite of fact. And logic. What is logic? Well, the fact that originally Chinese civilian martial art is called Quanfa, first method, is logical enough to prove that it's predominantly a striking-based style. The fact that all these Xingyi masters I mentioned earlier, in their record, they strike people and win fights, also further proves that it is strike. That's logic. Why would these people who recount a duel or a fight use the word strike if they actually favor throw? That's what actually is illogical. But obviously he never read any of those accounts. He never read about Sun Tang's account on Li Luoneng. He never read on other people's account to Guo Yinshen. He never read Li Zhongxuan's account on Shang Yunxiang, on Xue Dian, on Tang Weilu. Which is why he doesn't know that these texts are out there and these texts contradict his belief. And then he says, you falsely appeal to authority, first your friends and then some master who I know do not believe what you said. They said, then you have third comment about Beijing, really, who you think you are talking to, some rub from a strip mall. Well, if he thinks that these masters that I study under don't agree with me, provide proof, right? If he knows that for a fact, contact them. Contact my mentor's teacher. contact my 五星同辈 master, contact them, and then, you know, get them on record, get them on camera. It's not hard these days. You can just, you know, call them through WeChat and record your screen. Why doesn't he do that? So far he made a lot of claim, but zero evidence to back anything up. And somehow he thinks he's still winning this argument. Like, you know, does he even have some common sense? I highly doubt it at this point. So after that comment, I'll reply to him roughly saying that, well, you know, provide proof, you know, show me that these masters disagree with me, you know, or go on record and you know, and say that you think that my Mantis master is wrong, that his master, Grandmaster Ma Hanqing, is wrong. You know, say that my 无形同辈 master is wrong, say that Yao brother is wrong. Are you willing to go on record to say that? And then he just, you know, ignored me and stopped commenting on YouTube channel. Which is fine, because you know, other things I must be doing with my life than wasting my breath convincing someone who's so arrogant, egotistic, and misinformed.